Guys, Down Phoenix here. Never do movie reviews, but I just finished watching Rambo Last Blood, which is apparently the last Rambo movie, which is crazy because Rambo's been around for a long time. One of the biggest Sylvester Stallone franchises ever, and it's, really interesting, to see this finally come to an end. But the thing is, I've got a lot of things to say about this movie, because I'm a huge Rambo fan. Rambo First Blood is clearly the best movie in the series because it has a ton of kick-ass action sequences, but it also has a very human story that does a lot about delving into the psyche of someone who has basically been betrayed by his country. He tried to serve his country and do the right thing, but because of the changing opinions of the Vietnam War and so on, he was disgraced and he had a lot of psychological issues having to deal with and so on. And that's definitely the strongest story of the series, obviously. It's just the most well-developed. Rambo First Blood Part 2 and Rambo 3 both are pretty solid action movies, but they're definitely a lot more straightforward on that regard. They do obviously have some elements of the psychological stuff, but it just really wasn't delved into that much. They were pretty much just action schlock that helped out people that wanted action schlock, and they were great for that purpose, of course. And then Rambo 4, or just Rambo as it's called, takes a long break after Rambo 3, obviously. It was like a 20 or so year difference between the movies, and it shows him obviously being old and isolated and things like that, trying to just do his own thing, but he gets roped in and trying to help people out, and it kind of brings back some of those moments of him trying to redeem himself from his mistakes of the past. And that movie, I thought, ended the franchise pretty well. I was a little weary about them doing another movie, but that movie was really good. Probably the second best in the franchise, in my opinion. And so, with that, it's like, maybe like the last movie, if it's done right, could be really cool, but it's not. So first of all, they try to introduce this whole family dynamic, which is not introduced in any of the previous movies. If it is, I apologize. Maybe I forgot about it or something like that, but I don't remember any of this being mentioned even slightly in the previous movies. And Rambo's always been kind of a loner kind of guy, so it really doesn't make much sense at all. It would have at least made some sense if it was kind of explained in the movie itself, but it's not. It's just completely just thrown in there, and they just assume that this stuff, and you don't. There is not any information on there. At least that I can remember, I've watched all the movies, so it's been a little bit, but not that long. The last Rambo movie I watched was like 2 years ago. I rewatched Last Blood and Last Blood Part 2. It wasn't in the nose, so like, I really don't get the whole family dynamic they're trying to do. Obviously, it's to try to provide motivation for Sylvester Stallone, as Rambo, of course, to go on a last crusade, essentially. But it just completely falters. There's really not much of a point to it at all. They could have done that a lot differently. And the whole payoff for that was ultimately not even worth it. I don't want to spoil it, but something happens that you don't quite expect. What would seem logical story-wise, it's like, nah, it just freaking happens instead. Something that it's completely nonsense. Let's put it that way. I'm trying to make this as spoiler-free as possible, in case you actually want to watch this movie. I don't want to discourage anybody from watching it. I'm just letting you know that you're probably going to be disappointed like me on this here. It's just really weird because the movie is short. It's shorter than all the other Rambo movies by a pretty decent chunk. It's like at least 25 minutes shorter than the shortest one previous to it. Literally, I think it might have been a little under an hour and a half. So that's really short by today's standards for movies, because most movies are usually like 2 hours or so. despite that being so short, it was pretty slow in the way that the whole sequence of the movie was shot. Events kind of rolled really slowly, and then when you got to the climax, it was pretty far into the movie before we started getting to the climax, and there's like barely any resolution at all. There's like maybe 3 minutes of resolution to the whole movie, and that's it. You know, all the great action sequences, for the most part, are at the very end of the movie also. Like, the last 20 minutes of the movie is the good part of the movie, essentially, for action fans. Like, there is some action beforehand, but it's like he's being all stealthy and stuff like that. It's lame, you know? Which, obviously, there's that kind of stuff in the old Rambo movies. And in a way, I could see they were trying to harken back to Last Blood and Last Blood Part 2 with this stuff, but there was just like no tension or anything to it at all. It was just a waste. It was just like, you know, he's old and experienced and he's a badass and he kills him. You know, it's pretty much how it felt. There didn't seem like to be any stakes or risk to this stuff. And the motivation of the villains was completely stupid as well. Yeah, it was just dumb. Yeah, I mean, it really did not make a lot of sense. And I'm sorry to say, you know, this Rambo movie sucks. It sucks. Stallone's good in it, don't get me wrong. I like Stallone. He obviously plays the character very well. And as far as how he portrays the character, it's kind of what I expected and hoped it would be. It's just that everything else surrounding the movie was lame. All the supporting cast were basically one-note figments that were only there to serve the purpose of Rambo. Nobody else really had anything important going on in the movie. And I don't know. Here's something I want to point out. Like, if you've seen Home Alone, right? You've seen all the booby traps and things like that. This is basically R-rated gore porn Home Alone, is what it is. And that's what it is. It really is. And there's so much foreshadowing to it that you just kind of like knew what was going to happen before it happened, which is not very cool for an action movie, because if you kind of picture it in your mind before it happens, it kind of takes away a lot of the fun and shock of sequences that happen. You know, it's just a letdown. It really is. This is definitely a wait for a rental kind of movie. You know, I don't even know if it's worth buying. You know, just buy the Rambo Complete Collection. You can get it on DVD for like $10, or Blu-ray for like 13 or something like that. Just buy that. That's all the Rambo you need, guys. So hopefully you enjoyed my little review. And until then, Down Phoenix out.